Welcome, everyone. We're just letting people in and we will kick off in just a moment. Morwenna speaking. Welcome, welcome. Make yourselves comfy and we'll get started in just a moment. Excellent. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon, everyone. My name's Morwenna and I'll be your host briefly for today's session before handing you over to our trainer today, Laura Sheedy. It's a real pleasure to be with you for our second training series supported by Arts Tasmania as part of the project Building an Artistically Inclusive Future. We're really excited to be running these sessions essentially designed to build our capacity on the island of Tasmania around all things to do with access and inclusion in the arts. So let's get straight into it. Of course, before we begin, I want to acknowledge that we are all tuning in from various traditional lands today. I'm really happy and lucky to be on the island in Launceston today and want to acknowledge and pay my deep respects to the elders, past and present, and traditional owners of Lutruwita, Tasmania. Of course, these elders and custodians of this country that we're very lucky to call home have been our storytellers for millennia before now and are so important to all of the work that we do in arts and culture and also access and inclusion. We know that while the percentage of people with disability in Australia is high, that percentage becomes even higher for our First Nations Australians. So access and inclusion is a really important part of First Nations First in arts and culture. And the two are very much interlinked and intersected. So I want to just start by grounding us in an acknowledgement of country. So, a little bit of housekeeping before we dive into today's session. Our session is being recorded, so it'll just be the presenter that'll be recorded, so fear not, you yourselves won't be recorded. For anyone who'd like to access the captions today, they're available just by pressing the CC captions button, which should be on the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. Laura's going to manage the chat as we go through today, and she's really keen to have an interactive and engaged session with you. So she's very open to you putting questions and comments in the chat as we go through, and she'll address them at the right moment. And really encourage you to join this training session as however you are today. Do whatever it is that you need to be comfortable to participate this afternoon. So whether that's using a fidget or getting up and having a move around, whatever you need to do to be comfortable is absolutely fine by us. There will also be a number of breaks throughout today's session as well. So we'll make the most of those too. So thank you for those of you who joined us last month in September. For anyone new to this training series that hasn't heard this spiel before, just wanted to tell you a little bit about this project, which has been very generously funded and supported by Arts Tasmania. So our project is called Building an Artistically Inclusive Future. And essentially, it's around building capacity and upskilling artists and arts and cultural workers across the island with Arts Tasmania funding and in partnership with the University of Tasmania as well. And there's a number of different components of this project, including this training series that we're running at the moment. We've also just launched a resource hub on the Arts Tasmania website. So do go in and have a look at that. We'll make sure that you receive a link to that after today's session as well. But that's a really great one-stop shop with a lot of resources, checklists, templates, lots of good stuff to help you do access and inclusion in the work that you do as an artist or arts worker. And the kind of final piece to culminate this project at the end is on the 5th of February next year, we'll be running an access and inclusion focused arts and culture industry forum at the Hedberg in Hobart. So we encourage you to pop that in your diary and hopefully join us for that event, which is looking terrific. And Laura, one of our amazing presenter today, has been on our steering committee for that forum. And I know we've got lots of good plans together for all the good content that is going to include. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce you to Laura. I only came across Laura, gosh, I feel like it possibly was only this year, but she's someone I should have been aware of for much longer, because she's doing absolutely incredible work across Tasmania and Australia. She's a theatre maker. She has worked on incredible festivals as a producer and programmer, and is a really highly regarded neurodiversity consultant, specialising in our sector, the creative industries. Laura will tell you a little bit more about herself, but she was diagnosed with ADHD 13 years ago, and she's really passionate about sharing knowledge and developing awareness around neurodiversity to support artists, production teams, and small to medium arts organisations. So I am going to leave you in the very capable hands of Laura, and have a great session, everyone. I'm really looking forward to this. And Laura, over to you.
Thank you so much, Morwenna, and welcome everybody. There are many ways that we can spend our time, and I really acknowledge and appreciate that you're spending this time here with us and learning about neurodiversity. I want to thank Morwenna and Arts Tasmania and the Department of State Growth for putting on these incredible, doing this incredible sort of audit in the Tasmanian arts sector and putting on these sessions. I think it's really wonderful thing, and we've already got some really fantastic feedback, which is great. There's a few things I will just sort of point to now. Like Morwenna mentioned, I have ADHD, so there are times that my thinking and speaking will go off in tangents, but that's all part of it. I want to acknowledge and really welcome neurodivergent people who are here as part of this webinar today. Whether you have been diagnosed a while ago, recently, or are currently seeking a diagnosis, or have self-diagnosed, which I give absolute credit to, as much as being officially diagnosed. And one of the reasons for that is that official diagnosis is so expensive and therefore prohibitive for many people, especially in the arts. As Morwenna mentioned, I would like to make this as interactive as possible. When I say as possible, doing a few things and managing chat, bear with me, and we'll also have some Q&A at the end of the session. I want you to think about the things that I'm going to be talking through, very much in terms of an intersectionality across all facets of what might feed someone's identity, and particularly in the sort of location and work environment that they're in. I have really built this webinar around things that are particularly important to me, but in that I keep coming up as very relevant across the arts particularly, but just in sort of the neurodiversity conversation in a broader way. Particularly things there are, I spend a bit of time talking about, some of it's ADHD focused, because that's my experience, and a lot of my knowledge. I also talk about autism. Those two sort of anchor a lot of my discussion. That is certainly not by any means setting aside other forms of neurodivergence, which I will point to. So So yeah, so welcome to everybody. Please think about that sort of intersectionality. If there are things that I say about particular types of neurodivergence or experiences that are counter to your experience, please know that I'm sort of speaking through my knowledge and my lens, and I certainly apologise in advance if I speak in a way or sort of describe things that aren't your experience. It's certainly not my intention. This will be generally a top line, but like I said, there are certain things that I will go into in a bit more detail. And we'll talk through, as you can see here, there is a bit of is the first slide up, that main one? I do have an outstanding dear friend of mine, Alice Murray, who's here as my assistant, my tech leader, fierce tech leader. So
currently on this.
right. So one of the we've sort of got a bit of a list. Oh, this photo, or sort of there's a couple of photos throughout. This photo is from a performance of a show called Masterclass. That was made as a collaboration between Adrienne Truscott, who's a New York sort of feminist performance artist, and Broken Talkers, who are a theatre company based in Dublin. And that photo was part of taken from the Rising Festival 23, I think. It's a wonderful show. Perhaps some of you saw it. So we'll just click on to the. So these are some of the things that I'll be talking through. There's a bit of a list there. The other thing that I just wanted to point to is that I've set this up so that I'll be 50% of the screen and the slides will be 50%. So you may find that the slides, I've tried to keep the wording as few, some of them are quite wordy, but I have tried to keep the words down. So I do apologise in advance if they are tricky to read, but we will be providing them in post this webinar. And if you're finding that they are too difficult, please let me know and we can switch to a full screen. But as an access thing, having me more present on the screen talking, I think is a good thing for access. All right, so I think we'll just dive on in. Again, welcome to everybody, and I really acknowledge that you are spending your time here learning about neurodiversity. And so reframing accessibility. Accessibility needs to include performers, audiences, and employees with cognitive, sensory, emotional, and neurodivergent needs, as well as physical disabilities, which is why we're all here. ADHD is considered as a disability. I identify as disabled. It's not necessarily something that I sort of verbalise very, very often, but it certainly is in many aspects of my life disabling. Of course, like I touched on before about my wording and my language, how we identify and the things that become relevant to our experiences is personal, of course. So neuro-inclusion starts in the arts, but across the board, in how we design creative spaces, workflows, and communication. Now, these things, space and communication, are the things that for me are really significant in terms of the things that I come up against. At this point, oh no, actually, I'll discuss that in the next slide. So this slide here is considerations and blind spots, and it really is, these are the three things that I have come up with that really point to, I think, where neurodiversity and its challenges have arisen in the arts, and they have for me, and I think that that I'll just speak to these 3 points, but in particular, sort of what I've reduced it down to. And in this context, I'll just talk a bit about my experience. So my background is as a theatre maker and also festivals. I'm trying to not have the glare too much in my glasses. And in festivals. So a lot of my work over the last, over the last 20 years really has been in festivals. Met a lot in Tasmania. So I know a lot of you here through my festival work in Tasmania. I grew up in Melbourne. And that's where I trained in theatre. I also did some training at UC Santa Cruz in California in acting and directing many years ago now, and worked with a company called City Company by Anne Bogart that is Viewpoints is really the sort of foundation of my practice, and that is all about time and space. So it's only actually the last couple of years, year even, that I've gone, oh, no kidding, that my entire sort of theatre practice is around time, knowing where I am in time and space. So as it was mentioned at the start, I was diagnosed 13 years ago. My cousin actually, who I was living in the States at the time for 10 years. And my cousin who lives there had me over for dinner one day, and she had recently been diagnosed. She was, I think, 57 or 58 when she was diagnosed. And we were having dinner, and it was just her and I, and she was telling me about her diagnosis. Now, my brother and I had sort of made jokes about maybe ADHD, over the years. And as she started talking, this tears started rolling down my face. And she nodded, and I went, that's what you're telling me to look on purpose, aren't you? And she went, yeah. Okay, yep. And it all just, everything completely made sense, as those of you who have had diagnosis with ADHD would attest to. So it sort of suited my lifestyle, though. I was living in the States and I was coming back to Australia in the summers, working festivals. I was still working in a hospo over there. These are sort of work environments that are actually really conducive to not just ADHD brains, but particularly with ADHD. There's sort of lots of interest. There's movement. There's sort of things going around. There's sort of some urgency. So it was something that I navigated personally in terms of having it settling in myself, but it wasn't something that I necessarily thought that I needed to address. Even, the stigma around stimulant medication was still very strong for me at that time, and I could self-manage. So I moved back to Australia in 2019 and knew that I had to do my PhD, finish my PhD thesis / start my PhD thesis after 10 years in the following sort of 12 months. And I went, there's no way that I'm going to be able to do this unless I get some medical support here and talk about going on medication. Now, I don't talk about medication in this webinar. This is just I'm just mentioning it in terms of my own experience. So then I got full-time work, a full-time job festival, actually in Tasmania. Moved down to Tasmania, and at a certain point in that year, the first 6 months was sort of blue sky dreaming. I was working with the artistic director very closely. I was head of programming, and that really suited my brain, my sort of creative brain, and it was great. And then when it came to program lockdown and scheduling and budgets and things, that it just I just froze. Everything just closed. The computer says no, access denied. And so that was the first time that I knew that I had to talk about it, and I had to disclose in my workplace. At that time, I knew that had to happen because I just wasn't doing my job properly. But it was quite urgent. The festival was coming up. I didn't really have the time and the mental capacity because I was sort of starting to really drown to work out how to advocate for myself in terms of what I needed. And the organisation was great, but the timing was sort of prohibitive made it prohibitive for the changes really that in hindsight that I really needed. So at the end of that time, I was pretty burnt out, very burnt out. And then I went, okay, great, now I have to finish my thesis, do my thesis. I changed my topic in the March of 21. I started writing in the April. So completely changed my topic. I started research and writing for a new topic in April, and I submitted in September. So that is just an example of hyperfocus, shall we say. It was quite bonkers, but you know, I just locked in, and that's what happened. Anyway, after that point, I was incredibly burnt out, and have really spent a number of years just recovering from that. That and I guess 20 years in the arts, and you know, 30 years in the arts. I'm in my early 50s now, so I've just been fortunate enough, and I really acknowledge the privilege that I've had of being able to just completely step away and kind of get get my nervous system back on track. But those two times were quite pivotal in terms of my burnout. So that leads me back to this slide, which is, hang on just 1 second. Water break, everyone. Water. Oh. Which is that small to medium orgs have limited capacity, resources and space. We all know that. So workplace adjustments can seem to be a daunting prospect. Space, I think, is a particular issue in terms of small to medium arts orgs, and being able to have a breakout space, a quiet space, etc., is a challenge. So there's sort of, you know, there's, I guess, creative ways that you can possibly do workarounds for that. So that's one. The second one is that we work with our friends or people we've known and worked with for a long time. Now that's really fantastic in many ways. Like, I absolutely love it. I come back to a festival, Monofoma, I do every year, and come back together, and it'd be, you know, this wonderful time. And it was summer in Tassie, and it was, you know, we just had so much fun. It was really, really fantastic. What that can also mean, though, is that for someone who receives a diagnosis and of ADHD, for example, autism and ADHD, that's a doozy, and you've got both. Then coming back and asking for change, and change in the way that communication needs to happen, extra breaks that you might need, whatever it might be that you've sort of established are the ways that you actually have been masking and have been pushing through, that you can actually change some of those things, can be really difficult. Because people go, well, you've been fine up until now, but actually you haven't been fine. You've just been skating along. So that's something that that's another point that I've sort of come to, that can be difficult. And so both of those things, and the next one, I'll just jump to the next one and then kind of summarize that. So also coming into a new workplace on short-term contract. And so many of us, particularly in the festival world, we come in short-term contracts, a year, maybe 6 months, close to the festival, maybe 3 months. So coming into a new workplace on a short contract, claiming agency when you first arrive can feel challenging. Yeah, it can. You come into a festival 6 months out or 3 months out, you got to hit the ground absolutely running. And so to sort of say, I need some quiet time, or I need to be able to work from home. Working from home when you've got an entire team around and you all go, how does that work? And so that's something that I've kind of, so these are the three things that I've kind of boiled my experiences down to, and I think are significant points for small to medium arts orgs, for artists, and for people working within the orgs. So the answer, which is why you're all here, is to create a neuro-inclusive workplace where what we consider to be is neuro-accessible is not divisible from normal practice and spaces. So if we start making changes tomorrow, anyone coming into a festival 3 months out is already coming in to an environment where their needs can be met. Just on that too, and I actually haven't made a slide about this, but something else that I should add that to this, is around job descriptions. What's with job descriptions? I think that, I mean, as we know, particularly as a producer, there's actually, we're outlining 4 degrees, 4 actual university degrees that we are asked to have to be a producer in a festival. So after this experience of being of 2020 and having that be really very traumatic, actually, is how it played out. There were other situations. 2020 was difficult. I was away from completely isolated from my support network, and there were other things going on, of course, to contribute to that. But after that, I went, I can't produce anymore. Never doing it. I was actually not. I'm terrible at it. I'm actually terrible at it. Programming, producing, being in that sort of environment, absolutely cannot do it. And so as soon as I finished that role, there were people approaching me saying, "Grail, we need some producing work. We need someone to come on and do this project." So I went, "No, I can't do it. I'm actually terrible at it." And it wasn't until maybe 6 months ago, and I went, "I'm not actually like much of it. I'm not at all. The artistic creative version part of it, I'm really good at. I've got 30 years experience in that." And what I went is, oh, okay, so I'm taking myself and my experience out of the industry, which is not great for me in terms of work, but also I've got all this experience and knowledge in the industry, but I'm stepping away because I can't do budgets and scheduling. So then it's like, okay, well, these job descriptions that require you to do everything. What if a job description actually said, instead of saying needs to manage budgets for a creative producer, for example, what if it said needs to be able to identify across a project or festival all the line items that need to be hit in a budget, and then to be able to sit with the finance person and finance team and establish a budget and establish how, what then the dynamic is of, or the process then of that person being the person to manage the budget. So I can tell you exactly every budget line item across an entire festival that needs to be included. Absolutely no problem at all. But that's where actually my skill set around that stops. Sitting in front of an Excel spreadsheet and working out numbers, like, again, access denied. Like, I just cannot do it. The amount of job applications I have blatantly lied on, and that is because I can do the rest of it. So this sort of bigger picture of going, we're actually preventing so many people from being in these roles, or I'm using these roles as a really good example because that's my experience. So that's something to really think about. I think in hiring is, how can we reframe job descriptions that really actually provide a lot more space and are much more creative ways to engage with people who don't have these skills in a whole list of things that you need to do, but are exceptional at these ones. Yeah, I think that's something really, that changes that could be made that could be really, really effective and really positive to the industry. On that note, we're just going to take a 5-minute break at the moment. So yeah, I hope that's been helpful so far, and see you back here in 5. Can you turn my camera off?
Jump up.
Is my camera off? Oh, yeah. No?
That's all right. Wait.
Okay. Hello, welcome back. I hope you all drank water. So that's where we're up to. Okay, so I'm going to sort of power on now. And where are we up to here? Okay, so neurodiversity, here we get to, refers to the limitless variability of the human brain, how it works and interprets information. Diverse neurological conditions result from normal genetic variations, eye colour, height, etc. It's now a common and useful term for neurodivergent people to identify themselves. So I identify as neurodivergent. That's how I refer to myself. Many people refer to themselves as neurodiverse. Interchangeable. Actually, in sort of in the true sense, neurodiverse defines a place, not a person. So this webinar is neurodiverse because we've got a whole lot of different brains. Beside the point, that they are interchangeable, and as with anything, and as we'll move further forward, and particularly talking about identity first language or not, personal choice, dealer's choice on that one. So neurodiversity is the engine of unique artistic strengths. So the differences in brain function are challenges, and they are sources of specialised creative talent. So, like I said earlier, a lot of my focus is on ADHD and autism spectrum condition, and you can there's a combination of both, which, like I said before, is a doozy. So ADHD excels in lateral thinking, rapid synthesis, and improvisation. So, you can see why a neurodivergent brain with ADHD excels in a festival environment. My happy place, my happy place is on site, steel caps, high vis, and a radio. Happy place. Because I can be on a festival site and go, yep, no, those blue tubs are over behind that container. Yep, okay, cool. So the green room just needs 3 more bottles of Coke, and I can know exactly what's going on. It's my lateral thinking and my attention to detail, and my ability to connect things together is up there somewhere, as is with people with ADHD. Autism spectrum excels in. Back to quickly jumping back to the ADHD. Creatively, it leads to disruptive idea generation, connecting disparate concepts quickly, thriving under the novelty and urgency of live, chaotic performance or production environments. So autism spectrum excels in systemizing, meticulous precision, and deep domain expertise, so special interests. This results in the creation of intricate, structurally sound and high quality artistic. I'm just going to try and, yeah. So complex musical compositions, for example, precise choreography are things that people with autism could excel at. I just want to read it out again. This may not be your experience with autism. Absolutely. I am doing quite a top line descriptions here. So different neurotypes. So dyspraxia, a neurological condition that affects motor coordination and planning. I always say that when you're kids, we just can't catch a ball, terrible at catching balls, or often that's actually dyspraxia. So it's a sort of it's like proprioception and the way that we sort of, our bodies connect with things around us. Tourette syndrome is a neurological disorder characterized by repetitive, involuntary movements and vocalizations known as tics. Aphantasia is the inability to visualize mental images. Yeah, it's a really interesting one that, anyway, look it up. Aphantasia is really an interesting one in terms of visualization, because for me, in my brain, I need to close my eyes when someone's describing something, especially if it comes to instructions or directions. I need to close my eyes and actually map it and understand and map it. Like I'm constantly sort of making little movies in my head or images of how things work, and I've got it, totally got it. Dyslexia, a neurobiological condition that affects reading, spelling and writing abilities, pronunciation, and organising words into sentences. So the really sort of common version of dyslexia is that get your letters back to front, or you can't put sentences together. It's more complex than that. Again, I just want to reiterate, I know that the slides are smaller, but for many, and I know this is the case for me, that having someone talking for me is, when I'm watching a webinar, is I'm able to, it contributes considerably to being able to take in information. And we will be sending you the slides afterwards. So I do hope it's not too challenging, or that perhaps you can expand the size of your slides. So autism is a broad set of conditions and traits that may include challenges with socializing and social skills, sensory processing, repetitive behaviours, speech difficulties that can lead to communicate via alternative augmentation communication, writing, typing, or sign language instead of verbally. So that really does point to the full spectrum of autism. Many highly functioning still can be frustrating and impairing in many environments, along the spectrum to nonverbal autism. That is challenging in a whole lot of ways, again, of course. So talking about this identity first versus person first language, when we're doing programs, etc., for within the arts, we make a choice one way or the other. Generally, we go with person first language, but either can be, people have their personal choice. So terms like identity first language, terms like autistic person, or autistic individual are preferred by many autistic people who see autism as an inherent part of their identity. Person first language, terms like person with autism or individual with autism, emphasize the person before the condition, a preference often held by parents or some professionals. So I think in that, referring to parents, it's really about sort of identifying the child as not being autistic, being the sort of primary characteristic of that human. In the autism community, many self-advocates and their allies prefer terminology such as autistic person or autistic individual, because we understand autism as an inherent part of an individual's identity, the same way one refers to Buddhists, African Americans, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, Chinese, gifted, athletic. On the other hand, many parents of autistic people and professionals who work with autistic people prefer terminology such as person with autism, people with autism, or individual with, sorry, there are a couple of times I still have used ASD. I have tried to remedy that to ASC, so a condition rather than a disorder, because they do not consider autism to be part of an individual's identity and do not want their children to be identified or referred to as autistic. They want person-first language that puts person before any identifier, such as autism, in order to emphasise the humanity of their children. I would suggest actually when in creating programs, say a festival program, is that perhaps if you make the choice to go with person-first language, that there is a subline that says we acknowledge that this doesn't apply to everyone, or that there are people that certainly choose identity first. So ADHD. So the DSM-5, which is short for the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, the 5th edition, is the primary reference used by clinicians and researchers in psychology, psychiatry, and related fields to diagnose and classify mental disorders. Problematic in and of itself there. So the DSM-5 outlines diagnostic criteria, associated features, prevalence rates, risk factors, specifiers, and severity levels. So from a neurodiversity perspective, it can be both useful and problematic. Again, it's a personal thing, but having this shared diagnostic language allows people to access support, accommodations, and recognition for their experiences. However, it's also critiqued for pathologising difference. The DSM categorises neurodevelopmental and psychological variations as disorders, implying that the ways of thinking and being are deficits to be fixed, which, you know, there are many times a week that I wish my brain could be fixed in some way, not necessarily in a normalised way, but the impairments are real. So the DSM-5 describes ADHD as a developmental disorder characterised by persistent patterns of inattention, impulsivity, and hyperactivity. Absolutely not the case for me. I could not love naps and lying down more. And I would get to, I do quite a bit of discussion about ADHD in women. So that's the sort of traditional, and that is still used as the marker for diagnosing ADHD officially in psychiatric terms. Adults on the DSM-5 are sort of a couple of lines down the bottom, and I have a feeling that women specifically aren't there, but as we know, you know, medical history is not created around women or people of colour. So the more accurate definition, I think, of ADHD is it's an executive function dysregulation disorder condition, which means individuals may have difficulties managing their thoughts, attention, behaviours and emotions. Tick, tick, tick. So prevalence, and I'll just sort of tear through these ones a bit. It's estimated that 10 to 20% of the world's population are neurodivergent. 15 to 20% of Australians are. And I would say that luckily in Australia, the higher rate is due to better access to education and healthcare, and our relationship between government scientific organisations and the general population's trust and awareness of the information they produce is a healthy and productive one. We all are aware of the recent examples of references to autism causes and burdens of autistic people, presented by JFK Jr. So 1 in 8 Australians identify as neurodivergent, and it's estimated that 1 in 40 Australians are on the autism spectrum. That's a figure from Australian Autism Australia, an organisation called Aspect, estimated that 1 in 20 Australians has ADHD. Here's a pie chart. So that's a sort of breakdown of the percentage of people who are neurodivergent, you know what I mean? So yeah, half of the people who identify as neurodivergent across the world. And again, these are world averages across globally based on studies, research, census. So they're global estimates. So that's how that breaks down. Just quickly, Theatre Network Australia, they do sort of studies and reports every couple of years. They did this great study that came out in 2024, Working Trends of Independent Artists and Creatives in the Performing Arts. Now, while you can see here that the participation pool was relatively small, still 24% identified as neurodivergent. That's the first time that question had been included in their sort of research scope. 45% of these people also identified as disabled. Oh, Gabby's just put a thing, great ABC program called The Assembly. Okay, I'll come back to those more in the chats later. Neurodivergence is absolutely uncategorically disproportionately high across the arts. And that is sort of the things that I pointed to earlier about there's just a looser space for us to work in, to be in. Again, that there's a discrepancy. So for me, I'm a trained artist and a theatre maker, performer, actor, physical performer. As we know, having made your own work as an independent artist, you are also then a producer. So supports neurodivergent. The arts industry in many ways artistically really supports the neurodivergent brain, and festivals being on site, as I've mentioned, but then moving those skills into an office environment, into sort of a formalised office environment, which we need to really start to think way more creatively about what an office environment is. It's a bit like education. It just hasn't changed for way too many years. There's no one who says we have to work from 9 to 5 and all sit at desks, and it's crazy. It's absolutely crazy that we could think that that's the way everybody works. Why has everyone got ADHD all of a sudden? Answer is research. So I'm a research nerd, so that's why I've put this here. In 2021, published a study was released. It was looking at the last half century of research on ADHD. I'll put this here because it really does help you answer why has everyone got ADHD all of a sudden. I mean, that's not the case. It's always been there, and same with autism. We just haven't known about it, haven't been able to identify it. So you can see this very thorough study to 28,000, say citations, 500, nearly 600,000, very thorough. So the results were 1963 was the first identified research paper on ADHD. From 1990 to 97, the number of publications gradually increased from 10 a year, which had been the case from sort of 1963 to 90. It's roughly 10 articles on ADHD a year research. Suddenly in that 7 years, it increased to an average of 147 articles per year. Then from 1999 to 1920, the number exponentially increased from 264 average articles a year to 2,000 167 articles a year. There continues to be a growth rate of 11.12% per year. So therein is the bottom line of why everyone is getting diagnosed. It's research. People know about it. Doctors know about it. You know, the doctors that knew about it was minimal. They just did, and that is just increasing all the time. My psychiatrist actually, he was one of the authors of the new frameworks, national frameworks for diagnosis and treatment of ADHD. I've lost my train of thought, so I'll come back to that. He said something was really good. Studies began to include girls and women in the 1990s, less. So that's why there's a lot of women. Most of my closest girlfriends have been diagnosed with ADHD in the last 3 or 4 years, because we all gravitate. ADHD in girls and women. This is really important. It's really important for everyone to know about because of that, because I think that women and girls are finally being diagnosed at the rate that they should have been for many years. So ADHD in girls and women, often under-recognised and under-diagnosed. Symptoms differ from traditional male-focused models. Boys hyperactive, impulsive, so it's noticed early. Girls internalised, compliant, but daydreamy. Many women not diagnosed into adulthood. So for women and girls, ADHD often operates quietly. It hides under competence, anxiety, or exhaustion. It shows up in the woman who's constantly busy, but never caught up, who swings between hyperfocus and burnout, or who's told she's too sensitive or overly emotional. Women often don't get recognised until much later, when life demands outgrow their coping strategies and the burnout finally forces a reckoning. Often for women who have families, have children, this can sort of correlate, diagnosis correlate to their children being diagnosed. It's hereditary, not necessarily parent to child, but my nephew is ADHD, my brother, probably, but so many women grow up thinking their struggles are personal failings rather than neurological differences. And by adulthood, then we've developed an entire system of coping and masking. So with women, ADHD generally, it seems, doesn't come on. The symptoms don't really come into full force until year 9. So my psychiatrist said, just bring me your year 9 report. And I was sort of straight A's my entire school life. Then year 9, my grades go like that. A very, very steep decline. Year 12, I just scrape through. It is phenomenal to look at. And I imagine that many of you women who've been diagnosed have had similar experiences. Yeah, when Mum and I sat down to look at the reports, I was like, how was this missed? I did have to be careful because she was a teacher, so I didn't want to upset her too much. Common presentation patterns, predominantly inattentive, internal restlessness, not visible hyperactivity, masking and overcompensation, perfectionism and people-pleasing, emotional intensity and rejection sensitivity, hyperfocus, burnout, recovery cycles, co-occurring anxiety and depression. So I was diagnosed with anxiety and depression for many, many years, but because I just was lived in a state of overwhelm all the time. So, and with women, which is the case with me, my brain is hyperactive, which means that I need a lot of rest. My brain's going at 1,000,000 miles an hour from the moment I wake up, and it's really exhausting. So there's this invisible labour that goes on, not just for women, but it is very prevalent in women's experiences of ADHD. Most women with ADHD describe their brains as constantly on, but not in an obvious way. It's an internal restlessness, a background hum of ideas, worries, and to-do lists that never switches off. From the outside, they can appear competent, organised, but inside we, often managing chaos through perfectionism, overcompensating and people-pleasing. Perfectionism's a kicker. It really is tough. So just quickly, key risks: late misdiagnosis leads to chronic self-blame because you just spent your whole life going, why can't I do this? Anxiety, depression and shame. Eating disorders, strongly linked, because it's I don't know a lot about eating disorders, but I do know that it's not just around weight and body image, but it's a way of control. So with ADHD, when we feel completely out of control of the world around us, they're often coexisting. Relationship and work challenges, financial instability. Everyone I know with ADHD is just screwed. Finances just all over the place. Parenting stress and overwhelm, burnout, sleep disruption, etc. Internalized years of blame, depression, anxiety. Anyway, I'm going to move on. That's getting a bit heavy. But the reason I'm talking about this, though, is that because women are so good at masking, good at people pleasing, I just want you all to be really, really aware of that thing of when women now come to you and say, I've been diagnosed with ADHD. You go, but you really? You don't seem like you've got ADHD. This is why I'm talking about this specifically, because it's not jumping around the room. It's not all those things. It really, take it seriously. When a woman says to you they've just been diagnosed with ADHD, really take it seriously. Of anyone, of course, I mean, men, women, gender neutral, everyone. But please know that the woman who's telling you that she has ADHD, has been diagnosed, is going through immense grief now as her whole life is making sense, but also has been struggling up until this point, and you just don't know about it. She hasn't. I wasn't really identifying it either. So I'm just going to jump forward. That's repeated a bit. It's not rare in women. We've just spent years being labelled disorganised, anxious, inconsistent, when the root cause was never about motivation or intelligence. Now, I have a PhD. It's not about intelligence. It's about how to get that done. So neurobiology crash course, executive functions and dopamine. Now, again, this is really important for me to talk about because you read so many things about neurodiversity and types. People go, oh, that's what they struggle with, or that's what the challenges are. But sorry, yes, not everyone with ADHD is just screwed financially. I see that, Kathy. Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of ways, and yeah, many people are absolutely brilliant at all of those things. Certainly, again, I'm sort of talking about my experience and the people close to me. There is the counter to everything I'm saying. Absolutely, of course, across the board. I think I am speaking to worst case scenario just to sort of reiterate that it is impairing in many, many ways. Okay, so executive functions are essentially the brain's director. It's important that you know these things. So, well, for me, it's important I go, yeah, but why? They help us complete tasks, problem solve, make decisions, control our emotions, and sense time passing, which is a big one for me. Not knowing about time passing. So I'm going to talk about ADHD particularly here. Predominantly affects the prefrontal cortex up here, which directs the executive functions. The prefrontal cortex needs the neurotransmitter dopamine to function effectively. The ADHD brain has lower levels and imbalances in the dopamine systems. There are more complex neurobiology around that, but that's the basics. Executive function dysregulation disorder condition, which means individuals may have difficulties managing their thoughts, attention, behaviours and emotions. So the different networks in the brain don't communicate properly. the neurotransmitters, which essentially chemical messages that move messages from one cell to the next. In ADHD, the brains aren't passed, the messages aren't passed effectively between the neurons. And then with autism, it's a different thing around sensory communication. And but again, I've just focused on ADHD for this. So dopamine is essential for sustaining attention, remembering things, and staying motivated. It helps us interpret information about the importance, relevance, and value of a task and predicts how rewarding the task will be. If dopamine is running high, such as when an activity is fun or interesting, or there are immediate rewards involved, we're into it. It's much easier to get started on a task than when it's boring or rewards are delayed. So the reason I'm talking about this and specifying dopamine and how it works is that often, I mean, even to ourselves, you go, just do it. Just start it. It's just there. But if we don't want to do it, yeah, but we all do things we don't want to do. It's actually neurobiological for us because dopamine is needed for task initiation and to stick with the task and to understand the value of it and to be able to prioritize. This is a really great point to point out to where other people can help you. You know, Alex is, because we've worked together a bit in these things, Alex, who also has ADHD, is really great for helping me prioritize, because he knows, he's like, okay, you need to do this, you need to do that. You need to do that first. Because I'll come going, what's that? And then I'm like, okay, cool. So things like that, saying just do it, or you'll be right, if you just go through the thing and think, actually really helping that person prioritize and just break things down is invaluable, because it's easy for some people, right? Things that are easy for others is really difficult for people with ADHD and autism. So I talk about this a lot, that something that's easy for someone else is hard to understand that it's difficult for others because it seems so easy. The other thing is small changes can have massive impact. So especially in the work environment, whether that's in an artistic space or in an office environment, if you can just if it's a small adjustment for you to give someone a hand, to send them up a follow-up email after a staff meeting with a list of the things that came up and the checklist of things they need to do, take you 5 minutes. But I've finished a staff meeting and they're going, was I supposed to do something for marketing? Was I supposed to do something? Because I'm trying to kind of keep track of what's going on, but then it's just overwhelming. But someone else can just go, I'm just going to, after every meeting, I'm going to give you a checklist of the things you need to do and when it needs to be done by. And I'll sort of keep checking in on you over the next 2 weeks while that's done. You know, things like that can just make a massive, massive difference. So dopamine, signals in the brain that regulate, I can't read that, 5 minutes? 1 minute. Okay, 1 minute until a 10-minute break. Dopamine transmits signals in the brain that regulate, this is important, sensory input, so environment, stimuli, working memory and attention. That's going, okay, that's going, okay, that's that phone number I need to put in there. No, what is it? No. So working memory is your immediate recall. That's really debilitating when you haven't got that working memory. Someone can give me an instruction, I'll be like, yep, cool. What did you just say? Or I'll go to implement that. It's gone. Prioritizing working chronologically, like I said, mood and emotion, motivation, and maintaining focus. So I realize that a lot of these are repeating, but it's just, I really want to sort of drive it home about why these things are difficult. So for someone with ADHD, we perceive all visual and auditory information at the same time. We don't have an innate sense of time passing or how long something will take. So we struggle to grasp the concept of future time, which equals time blindness. Absolutely debilitating. I'm always late. It is it is so anxiety inducing. But I'll go, I can just do that in 20 minutes. It's absolutely not a 20-minute task, it's an hour task. But I just don't have that concept of time passing. Our memory of an action that just occurred, which is the working memory, or information or instruction that was just given, is impaired. Also a tricky one. So we're going to now take a 10-minute break. And I hope that's been helpful up to this point. Please feel free to put in the chat any comments. I'll read those now while we're on the break. Drink water, have a bit of a snack, have a walk around, and see you back here shortly. Okay, hi, welcome back. I've just seen in the chats that, yeah, Kathy, you pointed out that it's important to know that there are 3 types of ADHD. So some of my experiences may not be relevant for the other types. Also, everyone's unique and experiences things differently. That's absolutely true. So yeah, everyone please keep aware, keep aware of that. And yeah, Julie, like you say, we've all developed different skills as coping mechanisms. And over time, some of those become very high level skills we can use in work. Yeah, that's absolutely the case. I've had a few good discussions about that recently, actually, that people go, how can you do that as an ADHD person? They're like, just learn, made myself, do it. So no, you know, and you look at their systems and it's just wild, the systems that that are created but work for their brain. I didn't mean to take a photo actually of some writing some numbers and things down. Friends that I'm staying with, I'm actually in Naarm, Melbourne at the moment, and he's an amazing artist, sculptor, and he works sometimes on the computer, but when it comes down to it, there's just scratchings of numbers and all sorts of things on paper. And I have to write things down on paper and I have to write in pencil because writing in pen is just way too much commitment. It stresses me. Okay, so I'm pushing for time, so I am going to kind of tear through these a bit. Like I said, the slides will be available. Yeah, you're welcome to keep things in the chat, and I am sort of keeping track of that as well. Okay, so where neurodivergent minds thrive and why. ADHD, lateral thinking and originality, connecting disparate ideas, high energy, not me, and hyper-focus on interest-led tasks. So amazing strengths in the workplace. Autism, systemizing and detail. Some of these are American spelling because my computer still thinks I'm in America. It's weird. Meticulous precision, deep pattern recognition, and unparalleled expertise in a niche. I went and saw a theatre show as part of Fringe a couple of nights ago, all about the Titan, you know, the little submarine that ended up imploding in 2023. And this performer, it was about that, and the whole thing was about her obsession with it. She's autistic. It was incredible. The deep dive. She had merch. She had like it was incredible sort of study watching this her present all the information, going unparalleled expertise in a niche. So again, unparalleled capacity for attention, deep narrow focus of monotropism, which is the the particular sort of one area of focus. Translate into exceptional quality. So, I mean, that's an amazing asset to have in the workplace and in an artistic environment. It's like, can you go and research that? I'm like, absolutely, I can. My cousin, who I was mentioning before, who is potentially autistic as well, spent 2.5 days with very little sleep once researching baseball bats for her son. We still joke about it. You know quite a bit about baseball bats, don't you? So example, a textile artist or costume builder recreating a specific historical pattern or texture with millimetre perfect accuracy and uncompromising technical finish. A performing artist committing to years of exhaustive research of the minutiae of a historical character or a specific art movement, making the resulting performance or art highly authentic and rich in detail. So I'll just jump to examples here. Yeah, I might just jump through these actually. ADHD, a musician composing or arranging an entire score or significant portion over a 48-hour period of intense, dedicated focus. So, soz. Nope. What's happening? No, I'm just jumping between slides, touching things. So rapid skill acquisition, etc. You know, case in point, me doing an entire PhD in 4 months. We thrive under pressure. Now that's actually a neurobiological thing. So this under pressure kicks in our dopamine and adrenaline. So that's when we get absolute driving focus. I might have, you know, so long to do something, but actually when it comes down to the adrenaline of the deadline, good to go. The sharpest focus. So yeah, we'll talk a bit more about deadlines. So an improv performer effortlessly managing an unexpected technical failure on stage, or a curator swiftly reorganising an exhibition layout minutes before the doors open. We all know these people, and their chances are they are neurodivergent in some way, specifically ADHD. Does dopamine work the same in ADHD? That's a good question, Robin. Yes, I would say so. Yep. The aspect of dopamine relating to ADHD, I'm not an expert in that, but I'm going to say if you're diagnosed with ADHD, there is the dopamine, the dopamine relationship there, which I would suppose then combined with the autism is one of the really big challenges, right? So it's sort of a self-medicating thing. We need we sort of wait till the last minute, and then this kind of panic is actually this sort of kicking in the neurotransmitter that needs to be kicked in. But as an autistic person, this sort of need for organisation and order, it's really tough. I'm not ADHD, but I've talked to many friends that are, and it's like these two versions, just in constant challenge. Again, I'm sorry about all the words here. There's an idea that I wanted to. So lateral thinking and innovation. A scenic designer spontaneously links materials from a junk pile with classical architecture to create a startlingly original high concept stage set. Or rapid synthesis, a creative director combining 4 distinct elements: a historical event, a music genre, and a lighting technique, and a colour palette into a cohesive show concept in minutes. I think I've done that quite a few times. Thanks, Guy. See ya. Yeah, so lateral thinking and innovation, again, fantastic for many, many areas of the arts. This non-linear synthesis of disparate ideas, which is the root of originality. environment of the arts, both neurotypes experience sensory and communication difficulties, but for different reasons. So sensory input, and we'll sort of be talking a bit more about that as I go. For ADHD, difficulty filtering or dampening background stimuli. So, and can hear 3 conversations, the hum of the 8-track and the instructions all at once. So I can be in say, a restaurant, and I can follow 3 conversations around me and also be having a conversation. I mean, it's not that I try and do that, but it happens. So yeah, like I mentioned before, we take in sensory information all at once. We don't have a filter, which, you know, they're not able to prioritize time management, etc., because things, you know, that bright shiny thing, oh, there's a squirrel. So with autism, sensory sensitivity, specific textures, bright lights, sudden loud noises, or strong scents can cause physical pain or immediate shutdown. And in both, verbal instructions alone and are often ineffective due to memory or processing differences. It's really key to remember. For yourself as a neurodivergent person, don't go, oh, I can't if it's that. It's okay, that's actually what I need. I need it written down. I need it told to me. So that's, again, back to that point of being in a staff meeting. Cool, I can hear it. I mean, 10 people sitting around a table reporting on their departments. I'm just like, but there's certain things I will be able to kind of pull out the key points, but then I will need it written down, and then I'll need it diffused into actionable things going forward. So just telling me, I go, okay, I need it written down, or ideally then I need to write it down, because then I'll learn. Then I will learn it. So communication, verbal, not enough. Autism specific. Now, I'm not autistic, but this has certainly come up with my conversations with. Hi, ER. I'm glad you're very soon right now. I can. Yeah, these conversations that I've had with autistic friends. So, which I was doing actually a couple of nights ago. Reliance on literal interpretation. Sarcasm, implied critique. It's interesting. It's like, oh, or vague requests. Could you think about making this element bigger? Cause high anxiety and confusion. One of the amendments that came back from my PhD was the writing in the earlier section could be more polished. Could it? Tell me what that means. So yeah, it's that, just hearing that, completely overwhelming. I have no idea what you mean. Going back to job descriptions, proficient in numeracy. Again, a friend I'm staying with was writing a job application this morning. She's like, what does that mean? Count to 10 or knows algebra? What is proficient in numeracy? What is manage budgets? Up to $50,000, completely on your own, in the context of what? Be specific. Please start to be really specific in your communication. I've said for many years, talk to me like I'm a 4-year-old. Explain it like I'm a 4-year-old. Give me all the details so that I can actually understand. Again, then I can create the map. I'm like, okay, I will do that now. Literally, then I'm great. I go, cool, I'll just do that. Having to work out what that is, puts you in stasis. I think rapid synthesis, yeah, I think we can skip that one. We covered that pretty much. So practical adjustments for artists, flexible rehearsal scheduling, sensory-friendly spaces, lighting, sound, temperature, clear instructions, written and verbal, with optional visual aids, breaks and pacing for energy and focus. So I'm just going to talk about flexible rehearsal scheduling because I'm making a show at the moment with collaborators, and I've thought about this quite a bit. One thing I have deduced is that as a director or outside eye, it has to be someone who's neurodivergent, because my sort of trained interaction with the world is, oh, sorry, can you explain that again? Sorry, I just like the amount of times that I'm used to saying sorry just because I don't understand something. And we'll go like that. And people just go, hang on, I thought we were talking about that. With me and my ADHD friends, we go boing, 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 like that. And there's just no, like, completely follow. Sometimes it's like 12 topics that just like, oh, that reminds me of the thing. Oh, yep. And we can completely follow. So if I'm in making work with someone who, not all my collaborators need to be neurodivergent, but I know very clearly that someone who is going to be in a director or outside eye role needs to be able to communicate and sort of keep up in that way. So what is it if you have a rehearsal schedule that says, here's the space for a week? Collaborators at the moment, I'm working with a video artist, a sort of a visual designer, kind of outside eye, and myself. What if we go, okay, you can come and go from that space as you want. Sure, this isn't going to work for everyone, but I'm just sort of, as we move through this, really trying to think of ways that we can reframe, this sort of 3 weeks full-time rehearsal, 9 to 5. Like, it's so, just doesn't make sense. We've all talked about that a lot, right? It doesn't make sense. So what is it that we go, okay, well, we can all use that space. Let's say that we'll be there on Tuesday. Let's say on Tuesday, we'll all be there together at the same time. But Alex could come in, we've got all his, if we set up all his equipment as a video artist, he can come in and he can explore his things. I don't need to necessarily be there, but then I can come in and go, actually, today my peak time, I'm exhausted in the morning. My peak time is going to be, from say 2 to 5. So I'll just go on my way in. And he goes, oh, okay, so he's been in there all day. And then you go, oh, cool, I need to show Laura this and this and this. Well, that'll be great, we can work. Like, there can be just, I think, really more flexible ways that we can be in a rehearsal together without having to stick to a schedule of sort of KPIs, if you will, or achievements at certain times, or everyone being there together. Because the artistic practice is your artistic practice. Yes, you're working in ensemble and collaboration, but we're still individually working, right, as individual artists. I work in a sort of make it from the floor. I don't do plays per se. Yeah, it's just something to think about, how you can potentially turn strict rehearsal schedules as we know them upside down, or just expand them. Here's the space, have your stuff here, set it up, then what? So audience inclusion. Look, I haven't got a lot of information. I haven't got information here about relaxed shows, sensory-friendly options, but it's something that you can look up really easily, and I'm happy to provide information after this. I can add it to the slides. Relaxed performance, there are very key guidelines around what warrants a relaxed performance. I'm actually working with Melbourne Fringe at the moment. Melbourne Fringe, if you want to go onto their website, they are absolute sector leaders and have been for quite a long time in accessibility for festivals. Really, really leading the game on that. So jump onto their website at any time. They have Fringe Festival has a full-time access staff member all year round, not just coming on for the festival. So anyway, so they've given sort of grant money to people who want to have a relaxed performance and said you need to consult with someone in the arts who has lived experience. So it's been really gorgeous. I'm sort of having these great conversations with artists and working out how the relaxed performance sort of structure, or the things that need to be included, like, lights at least 20%, like house lights can come and go as you want, spaced seating, much more information about the show beforehand. Yeah, so that you can find really clear information about that online. So please go ahead and do that. Instructions and expectations. I have touched on this. This next slide has got quite a few words, but again, this is a really, really important one. That's why I'm coming back to it. So I'm just going to quickly read through this question that you have, Steph. How does just managing adjustments when multiple people have to get together but have different kind of... One person needs dim lighting, another needs bright. I think accommodations are often discussed and are easier to meet when it's one person who has different needs. But what about navigating contrasting needs within one group? So that's a really good question. I'm just going to read that out again, or perhaps you can all jump onto chat and see that question from Steph. Something that I've came across actually in a webinar that I was a participant in, not a host of. They talked about a charter and having a workplace charter that says, this is the way we're going to work. And this is, how do you work best? How do you work best? And I talk about access riders, actually, that access riders, everyone in the workplace, right? An access rider. I've never been asked. There's two things that have never really happened when I've come into a role in an organisational environment. One is, how do you work? How do you work best? Not what do you need, just how do you work? The other is, this is what your job is. I've never actually been told what my job is. You read the job description, but as I've established, and I think many of you would probably agree, they're just sort of casting the net as wide as possible. When you start a job, like, communicate with your person in your onboarding. These are the expectations. This is who you can go to for help. This is in a really expectation sounds. It always sort of seems to have a negative connotation to me for some reason. But really, really be clear about what the job is. These are the person you're going to have to sort of, you'll be communicating mostly with this person. Okay, you two people get together, marketing and programming, work out how you communicate the best way, what you each need. So really sort of establish the dynamics. This will just be, if you can introduce this and just have it be part of your culture, it makes a neuro-inclusive culture. Really, really does. How do people work? So Steph, I think, yeah, it's a really good question about contrasting needs. But I think that sort of idea of coming together and making a charter together, rather than sort of organisationally going, this is, sit and do it together. How can you do it? And again, that lighting, dim lighting versus bright lighting, is there a space that you can create that has dim lighting? Is there a corner? Is it just putting up some curtains in a corner of a room that is there permanently, that has a beanbag in it? Why are we all sitting in chairs at desks the whole time? We used to laugh about Google going, yeah, they have beanbags around and things. It's like, beanbags and couches, get them in every office. I tell you what, everyone will be using them. Yeah, this idea that we sit at desks in a brightly lit room all day, every day is just absolutely preposterous to me. Love that word, preposterous. Cool. Now, I found that in that situation, in that sort of different contrasting needs, discuss among yourselves and come to a compromise. Yeah, then everyone knows. There's not sort of just reduce the need for apologies. It's interesting, my 11-year-old nephew, who I was saying is ADHD, I've really clocked how much he's already saying sorry, because he's so used to being told, let's do this, be a bit quieter thing. If you notice people saying sorry, I know I do it too now myself, okay, you don't need to say sorry, you haven't done anything wrong. I actively say that when people say, coming in and out of bathrooms, people say sorry. We say sorry for taking up space all the time. It's weird. Okay, so general communication principles, again, clear, concise language, avoid overly complex phrases or jargon, Instead of make yourself at home, please make yourself comfortable. There's seating in the lounge or standing space near the back. Just on that, when you read an invitation, go, light refreshments will be served. What's a light refreshment? I don't know. And it always calls me, do I need to eat beforehand? Does that mean canapes? Does that mean there'll be alcohol? Is non-alcohol? What's a light refreshment? Don't use it. It's silly. Examples verbal. Instead of, let's regroup at the breakout session when the main conference agenda concludes. The breakout session starts at 2:30 in room 4. Jump back. Examples written. Instead of, the keynote will occur shortly before midday, the keynote session is at 11:30 in the grand ballroom. That word's somehow been cut off. It was taken from a document I've got actually that I will share with you about inclusive events, and it did say grand hall, so I left it because it sounded fabulous. Be specific again. Oh, here we go, garden hall. Be specific about time and place. Lunch will be available later. Lunch will be served at 12 in the garden hall. The workshop starts in the afternoon. The workshop begins at 1:30 in room 6. Even giving directions, just go down there and then you sort of get to the thing and turn left. Finish in 5. Oh, okay. Be really specific. Okay, short-term contract. I think you just deduce from everything I've said how to do that, particularly actionable workplace adaptations. I think we've probably covered most of these actually. Checklist templates. Yeah, we have. Flexible deadlines. Flexible deadlines where possible is a good one, but sort of staged deadlines and helping someone working out with the staged deadlines. Communication, again, done that. Okay, environmental supports. This is a big one. So both autistic people and people with ADHD really have specific or overwhelming sensory needs, issues. Changing the environment will, I guarantee you, help everyone. So flexible or hybrid work options, one great thing COVID did for us. Quiet or low stimulation zones, I mentioned, noise cancelling headphones, personal workspace adjustments. So what if it was to be able to have, everyone to have access to part of or their own whiteboard? I have to have a whiteboard. Have everything on a screen, just screen and notebook. I need to be able to see things up. Breaks between meetings, limit open plan into a visual. Yep, covered that. Oh, that's a repeat. That is that's a repeat too. Key takeaways for workplaces. Oh, I'm just going to jump to creating reasonable adjustment plans actually. So Access Riders, like I've touched on, invite all artists and staff to share Access Rider. A short doc about what helps them work best. Normalizing access rather than signaling anyone out. How to deal with job seeking as an ADHD person when every job seems to ask for attention to detail, doesn't it? Like really, as an organisation, for those of you in organisations, go back to your job descriptions that you've been putting out for employees. Really look at what jargon you're using, what are you asking of people? Be specific. Like I said, I won't apply for it. I won't do programming or producing anymore because they include things that I can't do. Other things I'm really, really good at. Access riders. So yeah, what access issues do you have? How these issues have been solved in the past? These are things for you to consider. Again, you can come, sorry, I'm tearing through the end of this, but yeah, you'll be able to go through these in the slides. So just as a bit of a sort of a wrap, practical organisational actions, regularly review policies, spaces and process through an inclusion lens, like really regularly. how's everyone going actually in work? Like, how's everyone's capacity? Not just when everyone's freaking out before a festival starts. How's everyone's capacity? How's your capacity? Including neurodiversity in recruitment and onboarding. Again, we have this thing where we're an inclusive employer if you need help applying for this job. But that, in my experience, that's where it stops. Provide mentoring, peer support, and professional development. So actual workplace, tailored workplace neurodiversity training, or sort of, having someone come in and really work with your workplace is so helpful. I did that at Footscray Community Arts Centre recently. And I just sat with a TV screen with my slides. We all just sat around a big table, and I was marketing, production, producing, and we just sort of sat and it was a whole day, half day, I think. And we just sat and had these great conversations about how these things can be addressed within Footscray Community Arts Centre. Yeah, it was really great. Leaders shape vision. These are, known. Advocates at all levels, provide mentoring, peer support. So in summary, neurodivergence looks different in every person. Recognise the presence of invisible labour. It's a huge one. I touched on that at the start, and it's really important that you think about that. For those of you who aren't neurodivergent, reframe cognitive diversity instead of deficits. So refer to cognitive diversity rather than deficits. Redesign your environment, processes, and communication. Just redesign them so that they work better. What do neurodivergent people need? Just change them across the board. It's not even about what neurodivergent people need. Just change your environment, processes, and communication. You can make really simple adjustments. Reinforce psychological safety and openness. Inclusion's ongoing, not a one-off. The final thing, I just want to touch on the Sunflower Network. Actually, Hobart Airport now has one of their big revolving electronic screens above security is we support the Sunflower Network. Sunflower Network is simply a way to make hidden disabilities visible. By wearing the sunflower symbol, people with non-visible conditions can discreetly show that they may need understanding, patience, and support. So, there's wristbands, there's lanyards, there's a wallet, a card that fits in your wallet. And then as a sunflower supporter, there's these things as well. I would suggest that have some more specific training around how to support neurodivergent people before you pop one of those on. But yeah, that's a really, and on airplanes now, you can get priority boarding, by the way, if you're neurodivergent. That's a wrap from me. That went in about 5 minutes. And I'm going to hand that back over to Morwenna. I just thank you all for being here. Thank you for being so active in the chats. I really, really appreciate it. And I genuinely would love feedback. Any sort of feedback, things that I missed that would be really helpful for any of you. And feel free to get in touch, just if you want to have chats. I'm really here for the industry, very genuinely. So thank you. And over to you, Morwenna.
Thank you so much, Laura. What a great session that was. Thank you from all of us for everything that you've shared with us this afternoon. Laura, I might get you to stop sharing your slides if that's okay. Just so you can share a couple of slides to wrap us up. Yeah, I got a lot out of that session. I'm a mum of a neurodivergent little person, and I feel like I learnt more about him. And also, I think my key takeaway is just around flexibility and how we all need more of that in the arts to create neurodivergent access for all and access for all of us. In our next session coming up in November, we will be talking a little bit more about access barriers and solutions, including neurodivergent access barriers and solutions. So do join us for that. We'll be talking in a little bit more detail around things like access riders, visual stories, virtual tours, those kinds of things. So What's coming up next? Our next training session is general disability inclusion training. So that'll be happening on Tuesday, the 4th of November, 2 to 4 p.m. And we'll make sure that that's quite practically based. So in terms of what solutions you can put in place in your arts practice or with your arts organisation. And then our final training session will be on the Monday, the 1st of December, 12 till 2 p.m. And that'll be around how we can all best work with disabled artists. And we've got some fantastic Tasmanian disabled artists joining us for that panel discussion. The resource hub I mentioned at the beginning, so that is now available up on the Arts Tasmania website, so do go in and take a look. And we've got our sector gathering happening on the 5th of February. Now we're putting our program together for that at the moment, and we've got a week's worth of potential content that we're trying to whittle down into a day. So I'm going to pop my email address in the chat, and if there are particular things that you'd like to discuss or hear about in that forum, we would love to hear from you. We're finalising and kind of whittling things down at the moment to our final content. So if there are particular burning topics, burning issues that you'd love to see discussed at that forum, we'd be really keen to hear about those. So Thursday, the 5th of Feb at the Hedberg, we'll have a kind of save the date coming out for that shortly. And there are other ways to stay engaged in this really important topic across Tasmania as well. CAT, Contemporary Art Tasmania, runs an inclusive arts peer network with quarterly online meetings. That's run by the fabulous Amalia, who's on screen with us today as well. That's a really terrific peer network of people coming together, working in this space. Anyone's welcome to join at any time, so do check that out. And also Modality Co, Rosie Putland, who we heard from last month, they have monthly hybrid events, and every second month a face-to-face in Hobart with speakers on a range of different topics around accessibility and disability, not just in the arts, but more broadly. So there are two examples of other things you can get involved with to continue your learning in this area. So thank you so much for coming today. There's my email address if you have any feedback, any thoughts about the forum or anything else. Following this session, you'll be sent a link to the recording, and we'll make sure that we get those slides to you as well. But yeah, we really appreciate your time in being with us this afternoon and wish you well in all things neurodivergence going forward, and whatever that looks like for you. So thanks everyone, and we will say goodbye and have a great afternoon.